All right, and we're live. Oh, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm still learning how to live stream. When I thought the music was running, it was actually the stream that I have going on a different monitor. Right, yeah. Thanks for tuning in. So tonight I'm gonna just do some messing around with Dungeon 23, show you my current progress. I might give you a preview of Runecairn, the Runecairn Bestiary that I'm working on. So it's still in early days. Um, I'm in the process of converting monsters from Cairn and from We Deal in Lead, and I've got some original monsters in Runecairn that I'm working on too. So it's still in drafting phase. It's not going to layout or anything. But yeah, that's kind of the next Runecairn project I'm working on. I've also got other stuff in the works for We Deal in Lead. Right, so I'll show you what my where I am at the moment with Dungeon 23. Let me. So I'll kind of, if you haven't been following along, I'll bring you up to date. So Dungeon 23 started by Sean McCoy on Twitter. Started in December 2022. Basically, it was a prompt, or intended to be a prompt to write every day. Write one room every day for a mega dungeon, and at the end of 365 days, you'll have a mega dungeon. So he used a specific notebook. It was like a weekly planner notebook. So it had 7 days on one side, and then it had a graph paper on the other side. So it's perfect, really, for building dungeons or building like mega dungeons or mega cities. So that's what I'm working on, is a mega city for We Deal in Lead. I've started calling it Omega City because that's what when I do TikTok videos, when I do the automatic captions, it detects when I say mega city. It detects because I tend to say and a lot, so it detected it as Omega City. So I thought, yeah, cool. That sounds good. I'm good with that. So I've done 6 videos so far on 6 different regions for Omega City. It's a Weird West post-apocalyptic city, so very much inspired by Lud in the Dark Tower, Wastelands, Book 3 of the Dark Tower. Just adjust my mic a bit. There we go. Yeah, so We Deal in Lead is a post-apocalyptic Weird West science fantasy, science fiction, Western odd mix, as is the Dark Tower, Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. So it's very much inspired by that. So the city, I'm approaching it like it's a modern city, but with some bleed from stranger or more dangerous areas. Because the world of the Drifted World, which is the setting of We Deal in Lead, it's very much a multiverse, so you can travel to other worlds and other times and other universes. So there's a lot of bleed over from those other universes. So, so I've brought in some like contemporary buildings, and it's very much it's turned into like a contemporary city, but with some weird West and some sci-fi and some horror elements. Yeah, so I've done region 1 to 6. So you can see here, this was my first, the first set I did. So I'm using a spiral notebook. It's pretty handy. It lays flat. It's really good for what I need it to do. So it's not gridded. It's like dotted. I don't know if you can see. So that works really nicely, actually. So you can see as it's developed. I've got rundowns, me reading through each of the description pages and showing the maps. I've got run-throughs on YouTube, so check them out. It's a Dungeon 23 playlist, and I went through one of them on a live stream previously. So this is my current spread for it. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the new camera, getting used to the awkwardness of live streaming. So I've got 2 entries so far for this region, which is region 7. I'll read you what I've got so far, and then I'll go through and make an entry, and so you can kind of see my design process. So area 1 is a collapsed overpass sinkhole. Concrete worn away and pitted by the elements. Enormous sinkhole yawns into reeking darkness, sulfur and ammonia. Shining eyes peer out from the abyss. So you can see... there we go, that's better. So that's the sinkhole there. And then area 2 is flesh-warping runoff pond. Squeaks and sizzles, releasing caustic vapors that settle on skin. Liquid warps and shifts living flesh, making it pliable and thin. Too much exposure breaks down organic matter, turning it to liquid sludge. So this one, you can see, is this area here, the little pond. So what I had in mind for the sinkhole is that there's a lot of like, because it's a post-apocalyptic city, and it's like far future, or like far, like 20,000 plus, 100,000, 200,000 years in the future. It's built up, and there's like a vast underground network of things, of both technology and magic, because the world is a mix of technology and magic. So having this sinkhole, like basically it's like a wound in the earth, and it goes into the to the underground, or into the underworld, really. So I like the idea of having like things that peer out, and like peer out from the abyss, obviously that famous quote. For the runoff pond, I like the idea of it just being this like collection of toxic sludge that not only breaks down skin, but it like breaks down DNA. And so it literally warps the flesh. So implied in the description is that it turns you into itself. Like it breaks you down, and then it absorbs you into the sludge. So you're there to kind of propagate the sludge. I keep things when I'm doing the maps. The scale is way off, but it's okay. Like I said before, it's fine. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be an exercise, and if it looks a bit off, then that's fine. It's absolutely fine. Right. So I'm going to do an entry, a third entry. So this is going to be area 3. So how I tend to do it is that it's almost like stream of consciousness, or what's on the top of my head. Like I talked before about gentlemen's, or not a gentleman's club, it's something different, a working man's club, because I'd watched a documentary about a working man's club, and I thought that, that sounds cool, and that'd be an interesting setting. And I tend to group things together, what would make sense in the area, or what would roughly make sense. So for this area, for this region, it's kind of going back to the outskirts a little bit, because I didn't want to dive too deeply into the center of the city. And someone suggested doing a more wildlife, or having more like flora and fauna, which is a cool idea to tie into kind of the untamed wilderness. So the idea is that Omega Cities is a great city, like the last great city on the edge of a desert. Like a desert that's starting to encompass the world. So I call it the Bleach Desert. So it makes sense that if it's on the edge of this wilderness and tying into like Western tropes, like a frontier city, like the Last Frontier, makes sense that there'd be like an element of the wild coming in, or the wilderness or the desert, like the destruction of the world. Right, so I'm going to switch cameras. Let's see how this goes. Okay. So I know it's a bit tough to read, but you can kind of get the general idea. You can see the map a bit better than the description. I'm going to reposition my mic a bit. Bear with me. Okay. Right, so I'm going to fold this over. Sometimes I start with the map, sometimes I start with the description. Most of the time I start with the description, but sometimes if I've got an especially strong idea, I'll start with the map. Okay, so this is area 3. Someone had a suggestion of it. So in We Deal in Lead, there's a creature called a spideer, which is essentially what it sounds like. It's a spider with 8 legs. Or sorry, it's a deer with 8 arachnid-like legs. So that was an image that Kim Diaz-Holm made, and I took and turned it into a We Deal in Lead creature. So he releases all of his art as Creative Commons. So there's a lot of his art in We Deal in Lead, and it's amazing, really evocative. So that's kind of the idea of the spideer. And I like the idea of, see, would it be more arachnid or would it be more deer-like? So is it a deer that's taken on arachnid characteristics? Yeah, I think that's closer to what I had in mind and what the image depicts. So it wouldn't necessarily act like an arachnid or a spider. Or if if you've got arachnophobia or fear of spiders, I'll try and keep it closer towards a deer description of a deer, just with lots of legs rather than an actual spider. So I think like how would that, what kind of territory or what kind of habitat would a spider with lots of legs have? Tracks could conceivably be like replicate like a bigger herd. So what would a herd of spideer look like? That would look like a massive herd to people not familiar with the spideer. So like trampled ground, probably live in trees. Would they be climbers? Maybe. Be able to run really fast, jump high, so potentially have a be able to reach higher food, like reach eating from the trees, eating leaves off of the trees. Although on the edge of a desert, wouldn't be a lot of trees, so they might have to adapt. Yeah, thanks, Asher. So Asher says, "Woo, love that Omega City is still going." Absolutely. Yeah. So a month into it, a month and a bit. So I still want it to. I'm gonna keep it going as long as I can. Yeah. So I think they'd have to be nomadic. So let's have a maybe not. Maybe let's have a look at the aftermath of a spideer migration going through this region. So the first thing that comes to mind is trampled. What else do we have here? So we've got a sinkhole, an overpass sinkhole, and a runoff pond. So potentially they would have traveled through the pond, or stopped to drink from the pond. what else would be in the area? Oh, so Asher says, has an idea. Boss version of the deer spiders could be like Sleipnir, carrying some terrible god from out in that bleach desert. So the eight-legged, Odin's eight-legged horse from Norse mythology. That's very cool. Or maybe, like something's tamed the alpha spideer and is using that as a mount. Very cool. So they could be pushing more into the city, having harnessed the power of the spideers or the spideer. It'd still be singular, I think. Right. So trampled area. Let's say still on the outskirts. What would there be? Warehouse. More outskirts than that. Farmland. Let's say sorry, aware of there we go. Okay. So trampled farmland. Try to keep it consistent. Keep the do that. Keep the design consistent, but again, I'm not worrying too much about it. All right, so trampled farmland. So I try and look at the other senses first. What does it smell like? What would the air taste like? What would it sound like? If they've gone already, then there wouldn't be any sound. But you'd definitely be able to smell them if they're a herd of spideer. Okay. Sorry, I'm just can't do two things at once. So we've got the stench of musk from a rampaging herd of spideer. So I always look for evocative language. More evocative the better for these kind of punchy descriptions. So stench is a very evocative, very strong word. Rampaging makes sense if something's driving them into the city. Stench of musk from a rampaging herd of spideer. Say just recently passed. Just recently. Departed the area. So thin brush picked clean. Massive set of monstrous tracks from countless limbs. So thin brush picked clean, massive set of monstrous tracks from countless limbs. And then usually I like to finish with something strange or weird or spooky or unusual, to just kind of I'll add that extra layer of uncanny. So I'm going to say, picking up on what Asher suggested, herd driven by unknown force. moving against their nature deeper into civilization, or deeper into yeah, deeper into civilization. Don't overthink it. All right, so we've got trampled farmland, stench of musk from a rampaging herd of spideer just recently departed, thin brush picked clean, massive set of monstrous tracks from countless limbs, herd driven by unknown force, moving against their nature deeper into civilization. Okay, that's pretty cool. I kind of ignored the farmland part, but in my thinking, it would have been an abandoned farmland anyway, because nothing grows here, and being so close to the desert, then it wouldn't grow anyway. Okay. So on to the image now, the illustration. So we've got the sinkhole, the overpass sinkhole here. And then we've got the pond, the flesh warping runoff pond there. I'm not too worried about how this fits in geographically to the other regions. So I'm going to put it here, I think. I think that makes sense. So I'll start with a kind of a cracked and dry farmland, like the actual where they'd grow the crops. And then a barn. And then a derelict farmhouse. Okay. All right, I can work with that. So I usually just have it be a really rough outline, and then do some elaboration with ink. Try not to overthink it. Just make what makes sense, or do what makes sense. Wobbly lines, because it's the post-apocalyptic city or world, so there won't be many undamaged or uncrooked buildings. I said this was the barn, didn't I? So let's go that. Panels. Let's be missing. And then let's have this be a hole in the roof here. A hole there. And the farmhouse, let's have that sticking out a bit. Like that. Okay. We've got a little path to the field. And a path out here. And then a path over to the barn. Like that. Okay. So to mark the trample, or like the stampede, the trampled farmland, I'm gonna have just, I did this before, it's basically just, it's almost like free drawing, just squiggle on the lines. Have have them kind of spread out a bit here. I will have them stop by the runoff pond. I think that makes sense. It's the only liquid in the area. So I probably, well, they'll be less concentrated here. So we'll be spreading out a bit. This is why I like digital art as well, because I could do this with a brush. But this is still relaxing. So what happens to the spideer herd when it gets in contact with this flesh warping runoff pond? How is that going to affect the herd? All right. Let's have them spread out around it. Or at least. So I haven't shown any actual NPCs or monsters, just regions. So the closest thing was like corpses floating in a reservoir, but I haven't had any actual creatures or humans or anything like that depicted yet, because it's all about the region and all about just the locations. I know locations are made up of people and things, or like, animals, but the focus of the exercise is the areas themselves. I had planned on going back and deep diving into some of these, maybe the more interesting ones, and have kind of one of these areas be a week, like have like a flesh out, like say I'd flesh out this sinkhole. It could be like a mini dungeon going into the sinkhole, different rooms or different levels in the sinkhole. Okay, so they've traveled this way. Right, don't want to go. Okay. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's have some odd debris in the field as well. Maybe some brush that they didn't get to. There. Let's maybe have a here, a silo, the hole in the roof. There we go. Okay. So this is the farmer's land. Well, no one's land at the moment. All right, so this is area 3. Okay, and I'm going to erase my pencil lines. I forgot to do it on the pond earlier. Okay. Sorry, shout up if I'm muttering and if you can't hear me properly. I tend to speak low in general, and especially if I'm drawing or focused on something. But yeah, let me know if I'm speaking too quiet. Okay. All right, so I'll hold this up so you can have a look. Help if I look to the right camera. There we go. Right, so this is the new area that I made down here. And there's the path that the spideer herd took. All right. So that is my Dungeon 23 entry for today. Okay. Put these aside. Cool. Emil says, sounds good. Thank you. All right, I'm going to switch back to my main camera and watch my fancy transition. There we go. Right, bear with me. I'm going to get a drink of water. Okay, there we go. So I've just woken up one of my smart speakers. There we go. Yeah, so that's kind of my general design process for Dungeon 23. A lot of it's off the top of my head, whatever's kind of foremost in my mind, what fits well with the actual theme of the post-apocalyptic city. Oh, hey, Cesar, thanks. Cesar says, I'm enjoying this a lot, super chill. Cool, thank you. Yeah, so it's kind of off the top of my head what I'm thinking about. It makes it into Dungeon 23. I'm not too worried about if it fits into the actual world that I've made, or the rough outline of the setting that I've made for We Deal in Lead. Because it's, I could use it for a future project, or it could be just an exercise. I like the idea of mapping it out, and I think I was listening to the Between Two Cairns podcast with Zedeck Siew, and he was talking to Brad and Yochai about Dungeon 23 and how it's more the getting into the rhythm of creating something on a regular basis. So I think that's good. That's the important thing. The end result's cool. If you get something out of it, great, awesome. But it's the process and it's the kind of repetition doing it that it's an exercise, and it strengthens my writing muscle, strengthens my art muscle. All right, Richard, thanks, Dad. My dad watching the stream, saying just dropping in looks good. Thank you. Yeah, so it's a muscle. So it's an exercise my various skills that I don't get a chance to exercise all that often. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'll keep going for as long as I can. I'll probably fall out of it eventually. I'll miss one too many days, and I'll feel bad about not going back to it. But it's okay. That's how it goes. So I was also going to talk about some future work that I'm doing. I was teasing Runecairn Bestiary. So there's 3 core books, or 3 books to Runecairn out at the moment. 4 if you count kind of an amalgamation. So there's the core rules, there's the introductory adventure, which is Beneath the Broken Sword, then there's the advanced rules. And all 3 of those are also collected in Runecairn Warrant Saga, which is a collected edition, essentially. That was published, co-published by me and Exalted Funeral. But the others I've just published myself. So those are the 3, core elements of it. And Core Rules has a bestiary in it, but I've also been doing one-page dungeons. So I've got a Patreon, and there's the highest tier of the Patreon. You can commission me to make you a dungeon, a one-page dungeon, in a system of your choice every month. So I've been making some Runecairn dungeons for one of my patrons, and in that process, I've been creating new monsters for it as well. And those dungeons I release to all my patrons at any level. So you get at the moment you're getting 3 one-page dungeons a month. Last month it was Runecairn, We Deal in Lead, and Isle of Ix. So that was a lot of fun doing Isle of Ix. So yeah, I've created some monsters for that. And I'm also converting some Cairn monsters into Runecairn because they're sister systems. Runecairn has a little bit more bolted onto it than Cairn. But a lot of the monsters are easily translated or easily converted. So I'm picking the ones that make the most sense and converting the stats, changing up the description and the flavor description. And I'll be making a bestiary book. It'll probably be a zine. Not sure how long it's going to be. There's going to be quite a few monsters. So I know a lot of people have been asking for monsters for Runecairn. And there's some tips on Yohai's Cairn website on how to convert monsters into Cairn from other systems. And I'm going to include something similar in the Runecairn Bestiary book. So it'll give you advice and tips on how to translate or convert OSR style monsters into Runecairn and what to look out for, what monster types there are. Because that's something that's listed in, or that's kind of implied in the Runecairn Bestiary, and in We Deal in Lead. There aren't. It's not like a 5e, the 5e monster manual where you have like monster type, humanoid, undead, and they have different strengths and weaknesses listed and everything like that. It's more implied. So in Runecairn and We Deal in Lead, you'll have incorporeal, or ethereal. I think incorporeal monsters, and they can't be harmed by anything but magic weapons or by magical attacks. But it isn't explicitly spelled out like that. But I don't know. It's still a work in progress, so I'll see if I explicitly spell it out like that, or if it's still kind of up to the warden, which is mainly what I've left it as. Okay, so I'm going to switch scenes again here. Just bear with me as I move my OBS over. Okay, desktop. There we go. Okay, so first I'm going to show you, these are the new monsters that I created for Runecairn, for the one-page dungeons. So you can see some of these are clearly inspired, because Runecairn is heavily inspired by Dark Souls and Souls-like games. So you can see like the Mimic, for instance, is heavily inspired by Dark Souls. In one of my 5e adventures, I created a Mimic, because I like the D&D Mimic. It's typically depicted as a chest with like tentacles that's sticky and that grabs you and eats you, like pulls you into its teeth, into its mouth. But I really like the Dark Souls mimics. I think they're really creepy because they're this like, it starts off as just a chest, but it sprouts arms and these really long gangly legs. So it's really imposing. It's about 9 or 10 feet tall once it stands up. And if you open a chest without knowing it's a mimic, it'll grab you and eat you, kill you instantly, pretty much. So I really like that style of mimic, and that's what I made for 5e, for one of my 5e adventures, Colossus Wake. It was I called it a chittering mimic because it makes this like chittering sound when it wakes up and when it attacks you. Like something like that, a bit deeper or a bit lower. So it's really creepy. So that's what my mimic's like in Colossus Wake and in Runecairn. So I'll go to that because I've been talking about it. Yeah, so true form. So the Cairn monster descriptions and Runecairn follow a similar pattern and Into the Odd. So there's usually a description of what the monster looks like, some kind of either behavior or tactic that they have, and then a special ability that they have. So Dire Strike is something that I made for Runecairn. I really like the idea because I wanted to have, so Into the Odd Cairn doesn't have a 2-hit roll, so you automatically hit, which is really cool. It speeds up combat, but you lose, you lose the dopamine hit for rolling a critical, like a crit. So when you're attacking in 5e, you roll a d20. You hit a 20, you do double damage. I mean, in previous like in earlier versions and Pathfinder, you could have like triple damage. But if you, so you roll a 20, that's a crit. Everyone's like, yeah, great. But you lose that when you lose the to hit rolls. So I like the idea of having a damage crit, essentially. So a Dire Strike, usually it's something that has like a d8 that does a d8 damage or more. Ideally something like a 2d6 or 2d4. So when you have to roll 2 dice. So basically what it means as a Dire Strike is you roll max damage on your damage attack. So if you're rolling 2d6, if you roll 2 6s, that's a Dire Strike. So something extra happens, something more happens. So for the Mimic, if you roll a Dire Strike, so if you roll 8 for damage on the bite attack, then you devour, the Mimic devours you. You have to make a strength save to escape, or else you die. And I had the one of the highlights of my relatively short TTRPG career was hearing Chris McDowell say that he wanted to steal that mechanic, the Dire Strike mechanic, and put it in his own work. So when he said that, I'm like, that's amazing. Yeah, very cool. So that's what a Dire Strike is. I try to limit it to something like, here we go, Headless Jotunn. So attacks with a Breaking Maul, which is 2d6 damage. And Dire Strike is the maul crushes the target's head, killing them instantly. So that's if you roll double 6s on a 2d6 damage roll, then that's a Dire Strike, and the target's killed. Because it's Dark Souls based, death isn't the end, so it's not quite as ruthless as it could be in Cairn, for instance. Death without a save, that would be a bit, I think, there are attacks like that, and it does happen, but it's not as bad. It's not as punishing in Runecairn. Okay, so yeah, these are the new monsters that I've created. So again, a lot of these are in response to commission. So they were situational. An interesting thing to talk about, actually, is so you can see I've got a colossus here. So a colossus is a specific type of monster in Runecairn, and I've also got Jotunns. So in Norse mythology, Jotunn is synonymous with giant, but it isn't in traditional Norse mythology. Jotunn weren't massive, like they weren't what we would think of as a giant. The closest equivalent would be like if Norse gods, or if the Norse gods or gods, then Jotunn would be demons, or would be gods from a differently aligned gods, essentially, or just different, like a different race of gods. So not necessarily bigger than a normal human, but so I've kind of left that really not vague, but I haven't spelled it out because I like the idea of Jotunns because they're an integral part of Norse mythology. Um, but I also like having a giant type creature. Emil says, gotta go, but I'll finish the video later. Just bought Warden Saga while watching. Oh, nice, thanks. Looking forward to Bestiary zine and getting my copy of We Deal in Lead. I'll check out the Patreon as well. Oh, nice. Thanks, Emil. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the nice words, and for buying stuff. Thanks. Take it easy. Yeah, so I've got this dichotomy of Jotun and Giant, and in Runecairn they're different things. Like a Jotun isn't necessarily big, although I've been clear not to say how big gods are and how big Jotun are. So I said I think I have a description of a forest Jotun as larger than a normal person. So that's that can cover a lot of territory. So I've left it up to the warden really. In my head, gods in Runecairn, gods and Jotuns are probably 10, 12 feet tall, so bigger than humans, but not massive giants. But when you come to colossus, like colossi, those are giants, and those are like giants potentially. So a colossus has a much bigger size scale than a Jotun. So a colossus would hew more towards the D&D type giant. So we've got a fire colossus, living fire encased in heavy iron armor, enormous, towers over the landscape, with a dire strike. So a D10 blast. So if you roll a D10 on a greatsword attack, blast means it hits multiple targets. So dire strike, deck save, or target is cleaved in half. So with the greatsword. So this is based on the Elden Ring type fire, like golem, or the protector golems that you see around. So that's kind of my version of a fire colossus. And then the Draugr colossus as well. So interestingly, in Norse mythology, a Draugr or Droiger can be massive. So they can tower over the landscape as well. Kim Diaz-Holmes has some amazing Droiger illustrations. Really creepy. So they can be like huge. So I love the idea of having a massive Draugr, because the Draugr in Runecairn are tough. And they have a there's a if you're in close range, if you're fighting in melee combat, you have to make a strength save or be poisoned. And a normal Draugr, like, you have to make a strength save or vomit due to sickness. Because in Norse mythology, the Draugr is said to like have a death stench. And that's kind of why I brought that into here. So another category of monster is demons. So the first boss in the Beneath the Broken Sword adventure is a stone demon, which is a thinly veiled homage to the Asylum demon in Dark Souls, because it drops down and it tries to club you. So that's another category. So not necessarily like divorced from the demon devil dichotomy in D&D. They're not aligned to a particular alignment or anything like that. They're just, I use demon as shorthand for like unnatural monster, basically. Or it could even be an elemental. So you've got a bone demon, frost demon. These were for commissions as well. Ghost was interesting because this is again based on Norse mythology. There's really cool like mythology around death and dying in Norse mythology. I think this is there's like 3 forms that make up a body, or to make up a human. Like there's the soul, there's a physical body, and then there's something like a fate that follows them around. So the ghost is based on one of those 3 things. So it's an echo of a vague human shape. So it kind of looks human, and that's the part that used to be attached to a human. Drawn to places of tragedy, mourning lost lives, incorporeal, resistant to mundane attacks. So this means that if you attack it with just a normal weapon, a normal axe, you're not going to do anything. So in Runecairn, resistant means immune, essentially, or whatever the warden wants it to mean. So it can be like the 5e meaning of resistant, which is does half damage, or you can be immune. But I like the idea of being immune to mundane attacks. Makes it more interesting. And this, again, I can't remember if I have this in We Deal in Lead. It would make sense to cross over too. But if you're in We Deal in Lead, the guns of a gunslinger can damage an incorporeal creature. So you could kill a ghost with a gun in We Deal in Lead. Oh yeah, so we got another category of oozes, because there's a lot of oozes in Dark Souls. So you got a bone ooze. I really like this one. Rotting bones surrounded by pale, translucent sludge. Moves across walls and across ceilings. Melee attacks split the ooze in 2, sharing resilience and strength. Very Dark Souls. And this is like a phalanx creature. The shield ooze. So phalanx from Demon Souls and Dark Souls, the painted world. And you gotta have a cultist. But this is a undead cultist, because they're hanged. It's Stone Archer. So this would be a colossus as well, and I'll make that a colossus for the actual bestiary. So this is, so that's kind of a snapshot of the Runecairn Bestiary. I'm gonna have illustrations for. It's not going to be for everything, because there's going to be a lot of monsters, but for as much as I can, for the cooler looking ones. And that's, I'm going to be going to Kim Dia's home. Because he does amazing stuff. And it's Creative Commons, which is awesome. I'd suggest giving him a follow on YouTube or TikTok. His handle is Den Unger Holm, or Den Unger Herr Holm. Norwegian or Danish. Sorry, Kim, I can't remember. So that's a preview of the Runecairn Bestiary. I also have these, which I plan on converting. So this is kind of, I am going to whittle these down. So these are Cairn and We Deal in Lead monsters. So it's not going to be all of these, but there's going to be a fair amount. Taking out the obvious, like, well, not the obvious ones, like making it so it fits nicely within the world of Runecairn. So yeah, there's going to be some cool ones. All right, I'm going to switch back to camera. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope you found it interesting. I plan on doing these semi-regularly. This one was a bit rambling, but if you enjoyed watching it, then please give it a like on YouTube and subscribe. I'm trying to build the channel because it's a nice dream of having over 1,000 followers. I've got 177. So it'd be nice if I hit 1,000 and could monetize the channel. But But yeah, thanks for watching. If you didn't watch live, thanks for watching the VOD, the what is it, video on demand version. I don't know. I'm not up in the lingo. But thank you to everyone who watched live. Thanks to Emil and Cesar for shouting up in chat. Yeah, thanks everyone, and I will see you next time.